Estado de Kuwait saluda a la delegación venezolana que está presente en este país árabe. Esto forma parte precisamente de esta cooperación necesaria en este tiempo histórico al que ha llamado el jefe de Estado venezolano. Ven ustedes a los ministros del gabinete ejecutivo de la delegación venezolana.
Government officials from Venezuela had been introduced to the Kuwaiti part.
Bolivariana de la paz en la construcción de un mundo multicéntrico y pluripolar. Dos naciones con una carga
These two nations that share a common history and are member of the OPEC since 1960.
Venezuela es por excelencia el país con las mayores reservas de petróleo.
Venezuela is the country with one of the greatest oil reserves in the world. Is in the first place as one of the first place as gas with the gas reserves in the world.
La primera reserva de diamantes, pero también reservas de hierro y bauxita. Una reunión al más alto nivel estratégico.
This is a very important meeting with high government officials of both countries. They are meeting at the Royal Palace. President Maduro is meeting with the Prime Minister and other high government officials.
Gracias, Graya. Es parte de la información que mantiene hasta ahora directamente desde Kuwait y precisamente donde se han venido fortaleciendo estas relaciones.
Hello, welcome back to TeleSUR English. As we were watching live images of Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro Moro's visit, his official visit to Kuwait as part of his first official visit and also his international tour around the nations of Eurasia and Africa. President Maduro and his official delegation was welcomed at Kuwait's international airport by the Minister of Amri Diwan Affairs, His Excellency Sheikh Abdullah Mohammed Al-Mubarak Al-Sabah. The visit is intended to strengthen the relations between the two nations based on cooperation, brotherhood, peace, and mutual benefits. Venezuela and Kuwait are founding members of OPEC, and the Asian country is the fourth nation President Maduro visits during this international tour. The Venezuelan head of state seeks to advance in the construction of a multipolar world without hegemonism.
We have just arrived in Kuwait after an important tour, very useful, from Turkey to the north of Africa, to Iran, and two Arab lands, working for the construction of a better world, the new mankind getting together spiritually and building new moments of cooperation and prosperity of our motherland.
The President of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, in the framework of his official visit to Kuwait, met on Tuesday with the incoming Secretary General of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, Kuwait's Haitham Al-Ghais. The Venezuelan head of state, whose country has the largest crude reserves in the world, and Al-Ghais, who will formally take office next August, discussed the direction in which they should work together with the other OPEC member nations, according to official sources. As part of his official activities, the president of the South American nation also met with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the president of the Kuwait Economic Fund, Ahmed Nasser Al-Mohammed Al-Sabah. President Maduro arrived in Kuwait with the purpose of expanding bilateral relations at all levels under the principles of mutual respect and self-determination of the peoples with a view of defending multilateralism. And Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro Moros visited on Monday the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khamenei's mausoleum. The mausoleum houses the tombs of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khamenei and his wife Khadija Saqafi and his second son Ahmad Khamenei and some political figures. It is custom that every high official or special guest pays tribute to Iran's supreme leaders visiting the mausoleum. The head of state signed a visitor's book at the mausoleum and left eulogy words on behalf of the Venezuelan people. Now we move on to other topics. A group of armed individuals stole 20 containers with gold, silver, and electronic devices on June 5th from a private property in the vicinity of the port of Manzanillo in the Mexican state of Colima. Local authorities report that a 12 to 15-man commando allegedly arrived at the facilities of the Maniobras Alonso Mireles company. After midnight, subdued the caretaker, the supervisors, and some forklift operators, locked them in a booth, and then committed the robbery by transporting the merchandise in the tractor trailers. Authorities are still checking the surrounding area, mostly from private companies, to find the perpetrators of the robbery. The president of the Argentinian Association Mothers of Plaza de Mayo, Hebe de Bonafini, expressed Monday her solidarity with the Colombian people and urged them to exercise their right to vote in order to build a better Latin America. In a letter published in the association's social network profiles, Bonafini described the elections as hopeful and affirmed that with the vote, many things are possible. The social activist wrote she felt the triumph was near and urged those who did not believe that it was possible to have a president like Pedro and who thought that it was an unmakeable dream to go to the polls. Bonafino reiterated the association's obligations to build together a free Latin America and sentenced that the only fight that is lost is the one that is abandoned. Brazil is awaiting the experts' report on 2 bodies found in the Amazon that could correspond to Dom Phillips, the collaborator of the British media The Guardian, and Bruno Pereira, the Brazilian indigenous, both missing for a week. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Ignacio Lemus, with the details.
Last June the 5th, British journalist Dom Phillips and indigenous activist Bruno Pereira disappeared in the Vale do Javari, a reserve in the Brazilian Amazon, near the border with Colombia and Peru. Both were interviewing indigenous communities affected by the invasion of extractive industries.
The government of Mr. Jair Bolsonaro is directly responsible for this situation of increased violence against the indigenous peoples of Brazil, for acting as a government by encouraging those sectors that cause deforestation, illegal mining, exploitation of water resources, and the eviction of indigenous peoples from these territories for the advancement of agribusinesses, mainly in the Brazilian Amazon.
The indigenous communities of Vale do Javari are asking for justice. Bruno Pereira was threatened for collaborating in the defense of indigenous territories abandoned by the Brazilian government. The former official of the government entity for indigenous protection, FUNAI, was exonerated by the Ministry of Justice of the Bolsonaro government in 2019. During the administration of the then Minister Sergio Moro, former judge in the Lava Jato case. The reason? Bruno Pereira denounced illegal miners in an operation that ended with the destruction of 60 rafts of invaders. In other words, he was expelled for doing his job well, and although he had served for 23 years, the Brazilian president considered him to be improvised.
Only 2 people on a boat in a region like that, completely wild, is an adventure that is not recommended.
In 2019, Dom Phillips had questioned Bolsonaro's anti-environmental policies.
New deforestation numbers show a scary increase. IBAMA is finding less and carrying out fewer operations. The signals that the government is giving to Europe this week are not positive in the sense of environmental protection. For example, the Minister of Environment was in Rondônia this week, together with deforesters. How the President intends to convince and show the world that the government is really concerned about the preservation of the Amazon. First, you have to understand that the Amazon belongs to Brazil, not to you. I repeat here, we preserve more than the whole world. No country in the world has the morals to talk about the Amazon.
The Supreme Court determined that the government should take all possible measures to find the journalist and the indigenous man and gave a period of 5 days for the actions to be detailed. Bolsonaro stated that dozens of people disappear every day and that the Supreme Court does not care about it. The disappearance had global repercussions. The United Nations qualified the searches as extremely slow.
We stress our concerns as to the wider context of constant attacks and harassment faced by human rights defenders, environmentalists, and journalists in Brazil.
Don Phillips' wife confirmed to the press on Monday that the embassy had confirmed that the two bodies found in Valle do Javari were those of the journalist and the indigenous man. But the federal police and the indigenous teams in the region denied the discovery. According to a report to the NGO Global Witness published in 2021, Brazil is the fourth country in murders of environmental defenders.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. On Monday, Ecuadorian security forces repressed indigenous organizations who were demonstrating nationwide in rejection of the economic and social policies of Guillermo Lazo's government. Student movements in the city of Quito denounced that they were repressed by the national police, who used tear gas bombs and blows, warning that their rights and liberties had been violated. The police have also reportedly attacked a group of civil society, students, and social movement demonstrators in the vicinity of a school.
And we cannot at this moment accept as normal that the President of the Republic continues to say yes to everything imposed by the International Monetary Fund. It is a very delicate issue because the President is either with the people, or if he goes with the International Monetary Fund, this dignified people will not allow that imposition. We have met with all the comrades who are calling for this struggle on behalf of our children. We're old, but we don't want this country to continue to be a country of slaves, as other countries are. Today we come from Carceling Bajo to support our comrades from the community of San Miguel del Común, and also to tell them and invite them to go to the city to continue denouncing this government that is starving us and taking away the future of these children. We're not going to allow this to continue. We're going to stop this misgovernment because it is leaving us without health, without education, without scholarships, without doctors.
And on early morning, the police arrested Leonides Issa, the leader of the Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador in the sector of Pasto Calle, where he had participated in the blockade of the Pan American Highway in the sector known as El Chasqui. There he was read his rights, both in Quechua and Spanish, in which it was mentioned that he was being captured for the alleged crimes of rebellion and paralyzed in public service. Now we move on to other topics. Peruvian prosecutors set a new date for questioning President Pedro Castillo, who has been under investigation for 2 weeks for alleged corruption charges. Peruvian prosecutor Pablo Sanchez said the head of state will be questioned next Friday at the public prosecutor's office. In this regard, Castillo's lawyer, Benji Espinosa, explained that the Supreme Court will review the appeal of precautionary rights, which states that the investigation should be dropped because it violates the president's immunity during the exercise of his duties. The United Kingdom government will submit to a parliament a bill allowing it to unilaterally amend the post-Brexit protocol for Northern Ireland. The executive, led by Prime Minister Boris Johnson, said the proposal aims to protect the integrity of the so-called Good Friday Agreements, which in 1998 put an end to the armed conflict in that British province. The so-called Northern Ireland Protocol was the formula found by London and Brussels to avoid the establishment of a physical border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland in the post-Brexit area. The measure provides, however, that all goods coming from Britain must be subject to customs and health checks to ensure that they comply with the European Union regulations. Human rights defenders protested this Monday morning in the High Court in the afternoon in front of the Home Office in London against the British government's immigration policy, which critics say involves the illegal deportation of immigrants to Rwanda. Human rights groups said the policy is inhumane and will put migrants at risk. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has said Rwanda, whose own human rights record is under scrutiny, does not have the capacity to process the claims, and there was a risk some migrants could be returned to countries from which they had fled. Activists are challenging the deportations on a person-by-person basis, seeking to ensure that no migrants will be eligible for deportation, even if the flights are allowed to go ahead. United Nations refugee chief Filippo Grandi on Monday alarmed an imminent UK plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda as an all-wrong as day before the first plane load of claimants is due to depart, warning it will set a catastrophic precedent.
It is the foundation of the right to asylum that people that are on a country's territory, especially a country that is a signatory to the convention and has the institutions to deal with that, to export that responsibility to another country runs contrary to any notion of responsibility sharing, of international responsibility, and so forth. What am I going to tell them if they say, a rich country like the UK is sending them abroad? I'll do the same. I'll close my border. I say, I want to save them from a dangerous journey and they can go to another country. The precedent that this creates is catastrophic for a concept that needs to be shared like asylum.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The Russian State Duma denounced the statement of the former Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski on the possibility of transferring nuclear weapons to Ukraine. The president of the Duma, Vyacheslav Volodin, emphasized that with this statement, the current chamber of the European Parliament incites to a nuclear conflict in the east of Europe. According to the Russian deputy, Sikorski considerations on the possibility of giving nuclear weapons to Ukraine demonstrate the necessity of the demilitarization of Kiev, as well as the obligation to ensure that the country remains a nuclear weapon-free state. The United States will grant Ukraine $1.5 billion per month over the next few months to support efforts to maintain the Kiev government open. According to Derek Hogan, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Europe, they have already committed $1 billion through diverse mechanisms to be able to provide that assistance, meaning direct budget support, which makes up approximately $1.5 billion per month for the next 4 to 5 months. Later on, Hogan stated that the U.S. is coordinating closely with its G7 partners to strengthen sanctions against Russia over its special military operation in Ukraine. During the special military operation, several countries established sanctions against Moscow, ranging from the partial disconnection of Russia from the SWIFT system, the closure of airspace for Russian airlines, and the freezing of international reserves of the Central Bank of Russia. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Saeed Khatibzadeh said on Monday that the recent anti-Iran resolution adopted by the International Atomic Energy Agency was politically charged and not based on the technical expertise. Such resolution, proposed by the United States, Britain, France, and Germany, accused Iran of non-cooperation. On Thursday, it was announced at Vienna that Iran had told the IAEA it was removing 27 surveillance cameras from its nuclear facilities. Khatibzadeh said Iran's suspension of the part of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action on the Iranian nuclear issue is reversible, but in keeping with the negative impact of U.S. sanctions, which appear to be irreversible. He also stressed that Iran's recent shutdown of some monitoring equipment is only a cessation of some voluntary measures and still complies with relevant safeguards agreements previously reached with the EIA.
Iran's nuclear measures are technically irreversible if the Vienna Agreement is finalized tomorrow, but the economic terrorists and illegal unilateral sanctions imposed on Iran by the US and European countries cannot be reversed, nor can the pain and pressure inflicted on the Iranian people by US politicians, including Donald Trump.
The president of the Lebanese Republic, Michel Aoun, ratified on Monday his country's position to defend the oil and gas resources during the indirect negotiations with Israel to establish the southern maritime border. The Lebanese president emphasized the country's rights are not negotiable and that its will be expressed to the American mediator Amos Hochstein, who will arrive in Beirut on Monday to resume the talks. Aoun stressed that the indirect negotiations with Israel were paralyzed after the rejection of the Lebanese proposal, considering the line drawn by the Army Hydrographic Authority known as Line 29. The President of the Republic expressed hope that talks with the diplomat Hochstein will move the negotiations forward and mentioned the pressures Lebanon faces to avoid investigating in its war of wealth. Now we address other topics. Chinese authorities launched a new mass test on Monday in the most populous district of Beijing after an outbreak of COVID-19 in a bar forced the reimposition of several restrictions. This outbreak, linked to the one particular bar, resulted in the infection of at least 183 people. As a result, authorities again ordered the closure of bars, nightclubs, and karaoke bars in several neighborhoods, including Chaoyang, the epicenter of the outbreak, and delayed the reopening of schools scheduled for Monday. The Chaoyang district, which is home to luxury stores, offices, and embassies, launched mass tests for its 3.5 million residents and millions of employees on Monday. All will have to undergo 3 PCR tests in 3 consecutive days. The Chinese Ministry of Health announced on Monday 143 new cases of COVID-19 in the country. Japanese official sources said on Monday that more than 9 million COVID-19 cases have been registered in the country, after 105,708 patients were diagnosed with the disease last week. The national accumulated death toll rose to 30,905 since the beginning of the global health crisis. As a result of the internal stabilization of the health crisis, the Japanese government continues to relax its border controls. It has raised the daily limit of entries to the national territory from 10,000 to 20,000. It has eliminated the COVID-19 test at airports and the quarantine for passengers from 98 countries considered low risk. And since June 10th, it reopened the borders for small groups of foreign tourists who can tour the country under the supervision of the Japan Tourism Agency and the Japan Association of Travel Agents. And TeleSUR expands its signal with new satellite parameters. Since more than ever, the world connects to us and our stories are being heard in other farther away nations. These parameters are in place since June the 1st in Latin America and the Caribbean, both in English and in Spanish, and quite soon further changes will be implemented for the signals in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. This new multi-platform will continue providing truthful content to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and our faithfulness to our audience. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.